Recorded.
So we all know the universe is big, and when the question comes how big, well, the answer is very hard to contemplate. But this lecture will be basically on not on history. How we found out the universe is big, like from Aristophanes from Alexandria finding the size of the Earth, from Galileo Galilei finding other worlds like Jupiter, and from Hubble finding that there are much more than the Milky Way galaxy. So this lecture will be basically on the basic physics and mathematics that the astronomer use to find out, to figure out, to know how things are far away from us and how we get to know the things that are distributed in the universe. So first we'll know about a little bit about the solar system, how we measure the distance in solar system. Then we'll go to the nearby stars like Proxima Centauri. Then we'll jump off the galaxy and we'll go to the extragalactic distance measuring. And so I hope when you go to the telescope and you see something far away, like Andromeda galaxy or some things, some stars, so you might remember this lecture on the basic physics that we used and the people used finding the distances, and I hope that you'll have at least bit of idea how the distances are far away from us. And about the speaker, well, all of you guys know about him, and if you don't, then please go search in Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So once again, welcome to the nicer Astronomy Club lecture. My name is XYZ. I'm going to talk about cosmic distance ladder, climbing the cosmic distance ladder. Okay. Well, I have given this talk many times, at least twice at night in this club. But this time the slides are new, this time the things are a little bit modified. Last time when I gave this talk, I gave it with Mr. Saurav Singh Chauhan, and so we distributed the talk. But before I say anything about that, I would like to start from what I wanted to say. See, I feel that there are two kind of people in the world. Those who take things for granted, who are living with a lot of screens in front of them and they don't bother to open up those screens and see what is beyond it. And then there are people who don't take anything for granted, not even a single thing. They ask, they question everything, and they want to uncover all the screens and see what is beyond it. Okay. And this type of people have been existing on this earth for like thousands and thousands of years. So we have the people have been asking this question, that what is out there? We stay on a planet. What is out there since some few hundred BC? Okay. But however, the development of physics occurred only recently. The major ideas which we know today, all of them due to the kind of physics which developed in 15th, 16th and 17th century. Okay. We will not give a proper historical introduction here because we are not interested in history, we are interested in physics. So I will tell certain interesting stories to you which you might feel that okay, yeah, these things are interesting. But mostly I will tell you the sum of human knowledge about what is out there. Okay. And the most interesting thing that
Page down.
why
Speak louder, no?
goes like this.
Yeah.
Fine.
Speak louder.
It's a continuous spectrum. Okay. Increase the volume. Can you increase the volume? Fine. Okay. So, the gift which we have, if you want to know what is out there, is light. And the gift is that light travels at a finite speed. The speed of light is not infinite. Earlier people thought that light travels at infinite speed. But now we know light travels at finite speed. And because it travels at finite speed, so we can see the past of our universe if we look far. Okay. So if you look to a clear sky, Bhubaneswar is not a place to look, but if you go to your village, or if you go to some place far away from here, look at the night sky, it looks exactly like this. And you see numerous stars. With your naked eye you can see 10,000 of stars. And people from since millennia have been asking this question that what are stars? Okay. And why do they shine? We see them shining. Okay. And then what are they made of? But we are not going to answer these questions in this lecture simply because these are astrophysics questions which we would like to discuss in this astronomy club, but not today. Okay. So some other day somebody, me or somebody will talk about what are stars, how do they shine and all. Okay. Today we talk whatever they are, where are they, and how do we know the distance of those objects from us. Okay. So if we are on Earth, then the typical distance scales that we travel day to day is like kilometers, few kilometers. Those who study in abroad go for 5,000 to 10,000 kilometers. So at max you can go from say New York to Sydney, which is 10,000 kilometers to 20,000 kilometers. So this is the maximum distance that you travel around Earth. The circumference of Earth is almost 40,000 kilometers. How big is the universe? How far can a star be? If you don't read anything, forget that you know anything about the distance of objects from us. If I ask you the question, how far are stars? You look at the sky and try to guess. What will you do? All you can say is your gut feeling. So you say you have some preconception about objects, about universe, how the universe should be, and you will tell, okay, stars should be at this distance. Why? Because the universe should be like this. That's how people used to talk. They thought that the heaven is a perfect thing. We're talking a little bit philosophy here, but it's very important here. So it's because you shouldn't be preoccupied with the concept of the universe. Nature should turn out the way it is. You can't say, no, I believe nature should be in this way. You have no one to believe. Nature is the way it is. Okay. So people thought Earth is the thing which is mortal, and the heavens are immortal. Stars are their perfect spherical objects stuck to some black color screen, and then they are like jewels. And then some people in India think that when people die, they go and become stars. But how far they are and what they are to know, let's go. Let's start. First, I will give you the sum of human knowledge about different distance scales, just to tell you how humongous it is. Okay. The distance between Earth and Sun is 1 astronomical unit. Forget about the names. 1 astronomical unit is roughly 10 to the power 8 kilometers. So our Sun, which we see every day, rising in east and setting in west, is 10 to the power 13 kilometers. Okay. 10 to the power 8 kilometers, I'm sorry. Then the next nearest star is Proxima Centauri or Rigel Kentaurus. Okay. And the star is almost 10 to the power 13 kilometers from us. It's almost 4 light years from us. So light takes 4 years to come to reach us from the star. So when you look out in the southern hemisphere, if you look out, you will see it up in the sky. In the northern hemisphere, you will see it just near the south pole, near the horizon, in the south side. You will see, you can see today also. You can try. After 11 o'clock, you can look Rigel Kent. You can see Proxima Centauri. It's very bright, and so you are looking back 4 years. And if you look for further stars, you are looking back more and more years, hundreds of years, thousands of years back. Okay? And then the size of our galaxy. our Milky Way galaxy is an island of billion stars, 100 billion stars, and the size of our galaxy is 100,000 light years. Light takes 100,000 years to go from one side of Milky Way to the other side of Milky Way. So it's a huge distance. Okay, one light year is 10 to the power 13 kilometers. 100,000 light years means 10 to the power 18 kilometers. You can imagine how big it is.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Wherefore the solar system, I guess it's the radius of the solar system. The ending, we are considering the end of the Oort cloud. Or what
cloud.
is the ending of the solar
so
system?
that is inconclusive. Yeah. So that's why I didn't say anything about the solar system. Okay. Well, roughly it's few astronomical units. That's all.
That's fine.
Okay. We are mostly interested in the roughly how distant they are. The things which we will discuss in the talk, there we'll discuss the proper distances and the error limits. Okay. That's a few 20 astronomical units or maybe 40 astronomical units. We don't know. We have not seen some planets of our solar system which is a little outside. Okay. And then our nearest galaxy is Andromeda Galaxy, whose story I will tell today. That is almost 1 megaparsec from us. 1 parsec, so I have to introduce this distance scale, which most of you know, but still I will introduce. If this is 1 astronomical unit, means this is the distance between Earth and Sun, then the distance you have to go, this distance, such that this angle is 1 arc second. You know 1 arc second? It's equivalent to 1 second degree, right? So such a small angle. So if you go that far, then this distance, or say this distance, it doesn't matter. These two distances are almost same at that far because this is very small. This is called 1 parsec, okay, which is almost 3 into 10 to the power 13 kilometers. Huge distance. Okay. And then this, so generally galaxies are separated by distances which are 10 to the power 6 parsecs. Okay. So megaparsec distance. So get used to this unit, parsec. Parsec is roughly 10 to the power 13 kilometers. Okay. So 10 to the power 6 parsecs are the distance between different galaxies. And we know in our universe galaxies are clustered here and there, making small clusters and superclusters. And distance between those clusters will be around some 100 megaparsecs, 1000 megaparsecs. So you go to gigaparsec. So the whole universe size, the observable universe size is 14 gigaparsec. Now, all of these will be covered in astronomy lecture series by somebody, I don't know. We are not going to cover everything today. We are going to cover certain things. We are not going to talk about solar system distances. Like, for me it's very interesting to know how do we know the distance between Earth and Sun? How do we know the size of Earth? How do we know the distance between Earth and Moon? How do we know the distance between Earth and Jupiter and anything? For me it's very important. It's very interesting. But today we are not talking because we are talking about the whole cosmos. So compared to the size which we are talking, the size of solar system is nothing. Okay? That's why we are not going to focus on solar system today. Maybe some other day we will talk. So because we are mostly doing astronomy, not extra solar system astronomy, so we will focus on very distant objects. Okay? So I skip everything about solar system. Just I'll tell you, most of the things we determine in solar system are by some eclipse method or applying Kepler's law, or nowadays using radar. You know radar, right? So you can just send a signal and the signal comes back. From the time that it takes to come back, you can know the distance. But the old methods are very interesting. We will discuss some other day. Now, the best tool. How did we come to know the distance of the star? When was the first measurement of a distance of a star was done? So people generally thought stars maybe 1,000 kilometers, maybe 50,000 kilometers. They didn't know how far they are. Okay. So it occurred because we learned a method which is called parallax, which you all know. I have to describe, so I will describe. So if you are looking at a background which is very far, in that background, if you are looking at a object which is nearby, and then you are shifting your angle of view, then the object shifts. Like if I close my one eye and look at my finger with respect to Sagar, then I see my finger with my right eye closed, I see Diptanil. Okay, so it shifts. The further the object is, the less is the shift. The angular shift is less. Okay, the nearer it is, the more it shifts. Okay, so by measuring the angular shift, you can say, if you know the size, if you know the distance between Sagar and Diptanil, if you know this distance, just by looking the shift, you can know this distance. Okay, this we want to know. If we know this and this angle, then we know this for far away objects. Because if you take a whole circle, 2 pi r, arc length, subtends the angle which is 2 pi. Fine? So any arc length we know, say S. S will subtend an angle, how much? R. Okay?
R d theta is S.
Is fine? Delta theta. Sorry.
No, R delta theta is S.
Okay. So S equals to R delta theta. If this angle is delta theta, so this is some fraction of 2 pi. So that fraction is divided. Cancel out. Okay. So you get R, S equals to R delta theta. So this is equals to R times this angle, which is always true for big angles, for small angles. Okay. Now if distances are very large, then this curvature, this the part of a circle is almost like a straight line. Right? So all you have to know is the distance between these 2 points. Then you can measure. Okay. So we will use this method to measure the distance of different objects. But I will tell you a little history which is very interesting to me personally. The supernova, which is called Tycho Brahe supernova, which is 1647 supernova. So what happened in 1647? A great astronomer of that age called Tycho Brahe was observing the sky, and suddenly he saw a new star appearing in some direction and glowing as brightly as the sun. Okay. So he wanted to know what is it. People say that the heavens are perfect, the stars are perfect things, they don't change at all. So this thing must be something in the cloud, in the atmosphere of Earth. Something must be happening. The God might be angry or something might be happening. So he wanted to know it. So he said, okay, if it is nearby, then if I measure the distance of this object or measure the angular inclination of this object from two different sides of Earth, Earth is a small thing. Okay. If the distance is nearby, so if this is Earth and say this is the atmosphere and the object is here, then if you look from here and you look from here, then the view will shift, right? Corresponding to the stars which are fixed in the background. Like corresponding to this star, when you look this object, bright object, it looks along the star, okay? But when you look from here, it looks so much angle deviated from that star. So if you see a large deviation, then you know the object is nearby. If you see a very small deviation, then the object is not there, it's very far. So he did the same thing. And he didn't have to go from one side of Earth to other side. He just have to do the measurement once just before sunrise and once just after sunset. Earth is rotating. Okay, fine. So when he did it, he didn't get any parallax. By the way, his instruments were not sensitive enough to get the actual parallax of that object, which was far actually. But his instrument was sensitive enough to measure the parallax of the object if the object was here. And he didn't see any parallax. So it was a null measurement. Okay. So he said that this object must be astronomical, must be very, very far. And this is how the use of parallax method started in astronomy, and then everybody used it. So the first measurement of stars was done by this parallax method. Okay. What is happening? Just close it and reopen it. It's okay, fine. I don't need that. So, so if you're looking at a star which is nearby, in the background of stars which are really, really far. See, please stop me and ask me a question if you don't understand anything. Today I'm not hurrying, okay? I'm going slow. So if you see a star here, say in winter, and then in summer you are here. Sorry, this is winter. In winter you see the star in the background stars, and you find it here. And in summer you find it here. So you know this angle, how much is deviated by aligning your telescope. Okay. From there you will get this angle. If you know this distance is 1 astronomical unit, and you get this angle, then you know this distance, right? That's how you measure the distance. So the first, I forgot the name of the first star. It was something in Centaurus, and the angle was really small. It was some very, very small arcsecond, but the distance was some. I don't think so. There's no confusion here. Okay, but there are limitations. Limitations are that I told you one parsec distance subtends an angle which is see, we have only maximum 1 astronomical unit, right? We don't have much freedom. We can't jump out of our solar system and move around. Okay, so we have maximum distance which can be used as a ruler is just 1 or 2 astronomical units. Okay. However, as we see further and further stars, the angle goes decreasing. I told you 1 parsec is will measure 1 arcsecond. So if you go to 1 kilo parsec, it will be 1 milli arcsecond, and that is the limit of all the telescopes on Earth. Okay, we can't resolve objects. We can't measure angles smaller than that. That is the limit of our telescope. So you can't measure any angle which is smaller than that. All angles are measured using telescopes. Okay. So that's why this method is very.
Then why do we need to look at it summer and then winter? We can do it the calculation on a 18 months.
Yeah, so you can. Why do we need to measure twice during summer and during
Yeah,
winter?
it's because so if you know exactly this angle, you don't need. The point is you don't know exactly this angle. So what you do is the first angle and the relative second angle of the telescope, the same telescope.
Okay.
Okay, and you measure the distance, the difference between them. Okay. So we can go to maximum 2, 3, 4, 5 kiloparsecs, and 2, 3, 4, 5 kiloparsecs are like anyway. So this is not our galaxy. We can't see our galaxy like this. This is Andromeda galaxy. Okay, and our sun is somewhere here, little small point. And using this parallax method, we can. I'm saying, just imagine it as if, see, Milky Way galaxy is almost like Andromeda galaxy as far as winter. We can see it, and Milky Way and our solar system is something around 10 kiloparsecs away from the center of Milky Way. Okay, so if this is Milky Way, say, then our sun will be somewhere here as a point, small point. Okay, our whole solar system will be a point here, and the measurements which we have done using this parallax method will only cover here this much distance. So out of the whole cosmos, just choosing a small galaxy, our galaxy, which is not small, but okay, we can only measure this much distance using parallax method. Actually, the best measurement of parallax method was done by not by an Earth-based telescope, because when you are measuring angles, the object shouldn't fluctuate, because we are measuring so small angles using the telescope. So the object should stay there. So we took our telescope to the space where there is no atmospheric turbulence. Okay, it was called Hipparcos mission, and we had almost 1 lakh stars whose distance we measured using parallax. Okay, but those stars are only here. The whole galaxy is there, and if we go beyond, parallax won't work, because the angle is so small that our telescopes are not good enough to see those small angles. Okay. So now before going to how to measure distances of stars which are far away in our galaxy, I want to tell you there are 2 kinds of methods in which you can measure the distance. The first method is called standard rulers. The second method is called standard candles. Okay. In parallax, what we are doing is we are using a standard ruler. Ruler is a stick. Okay, it's a meter stick or any stick. If you know the length of the stick, then just by measuring the angle that it subtends with you, you know at what is the distance of the stick from you. Fine. So if I have a stick, in the parallax measurement we use the orbit of Earth, the diameter, the measure axis of Earth and Earth around Sun as the meter stick, because we knew the distance. Then by measuring angle we knew what distance stars are. So these are called standard rulers. Standard because you know their length. Then there are other things which are called standard candles, about whom I will discuss, because even in my last talk I discussed about standard candles, but we will discuss properly. So standard rulers are Earth's orbital size for parallax, very important thing. Any other question?
Can we find the luminosity in a particular frequency or in a particular spectrum?
Yes.
Suppose like only for
A particular filter, right? So you put that filter. Can get it. We do know it. Like we know sun's intensity in all filters. So we know that in yellow it peaks. That's how we know it's a black body. We know it. These are called spectrum. There might be difference.
Yeah. For the type 1 supernova which you talked about earlier,
We'll come to it. Till now, whatever we have discussed. Any questions? Okay. So should I start?
yeah.
Fine. They must be found in all directions so that you can know distance to objects in all directions. They must be found in nearest region of Milky Way as well as in faraway galaxies. Why? I will tell. This is the most important point of this talk. See, the title of this talk is Cosmic Distance Ladder, and this is most important to form the ladder. It must be found in nearest region as well as in the furthest region. That is what Sagar was telling you. It's the most important point. I will tell you. Second thing, it must not be affected by evolutionary changes. Okay? In the sense, you should know about the object forever. If the object is too much sensitive to evolutionary changes, in the sense, as time passes, the object changes its luminosity or its size, then you can't trust it. Right? You can only trust if you know it.
But in the type 1 supernova, it changes, right?
In type 1 supernova, we will come to it. Okay. Why is this happening?
Close it.
Anyway, so here what I am doing is I am just explaining the diagram which I drew. So if you go far away from a source, then the flux which you measure falls like 1 by r square. Okay. Sorry. What is wrong? So there are certain kind of stars which are variable stars. The physics of those variable stars we will learn in some classes, but I'll tell you the basics of those stars which are used for distance measurement. So these are the kind of stars which are called Cepheid variable stars. There are different kind of variable stars. They are variable because the intensity, the luminosity of those stars varies with time. So if you look at those stars, they become dim and they become sometimes bright. Okay. Cepheid variables are periodic variable stars. They vary in periods. And this was discovered long back, even before the 1900s. But in 1900, in the early 1900s, some great astronomers found out that the time period of oscillation of these Cepheid variables, oscillation means you are looking at the Cepheid variable, you are collecting the light from it. You are seeing sometimes it become brighter and then sometimes dimmer, brighter, dimmer, and this period is fixed at a constant period. Okay. And this time period changes. So this is the graph. This is how you see it. So what they observed was, if you plot in days, here it's days, log of time in days, and here the amount of power you get, then you get a straight line. In the sense the period. So if one Cepheid variable has a period which is 10 days, then it will have some luminosity here. If it has a periodicity 100 days, then it will have a greater luminosity here. And the log plot is a straight line. and this is true for all Cepheid variables. Okay. So what you do, you go to
The secret variables plot that he was talking about is
Namit, can you start now?
no, that's not the problem.
this is the Cepheid variable plot. Okay. So as time goes on, it becomes dimmer, brighter, dimmer, brighter, dimmer, brighter. Done. Now this is the most important. So you take a lot of Cepheid variables nearby. I think you people are not getting what I'm saying. The actual luminosity of a Cepheid variable varies. So if you take the average luminosity, and take the period, then that's a straight line. Okay. Now how do you know the average luminosity of any Cepheid variable? That is what Sagar was explaining. That's a very important point. First, suppose you have a Cepheid variable which is nearby. So by parallax method you know the distance. Once you know the distance, just by measuring the flux, you know the luminosity. Don't forget this formula throughout the talk. Flux equals to luminosity by 4 pi distance square, right? Flux is a quantity which you can always measure in experiments, in observation. Okay? So you measure this, and if you know the distance by parallax method, if the star is nearby, then you know the luminosity, right? So you go for all the nearby Cepheid variables, and you see for all nearby Cepheid variables, this trend is followed. And and trust me that when you see a star, you know that it's a Cepheid variable. It has some signature in its spectrum, which I can't go today. So you know it's a Cepheid variable, and all the Cepheid variables follow this trend. So wherever, so if there is a far away Cepheid variable, so if this is our galaxy, we are here, some Cepheid variable is here, and they are variable, and so they brighten up a lot. Okay, that's why you can see them at far away distances. Normal stars cannot be seen very far away, but Cepheid variables can be seen because they become very bright. Sometimes they become very dim, bright and dim. Why they become this, we'll see. But let's first focus on the distance measurement technique. So you see the Cepheid variable, which are all nearby Cepheid variables, and you know they follow a trend, and you believe that all the Cepheid variables in the world follow the same physics. Okay, why would the Cepheid variables here will be different from the Cepheid variables? For now, I'm saying when I tell you the mechanism, then you will know that it's always the same. Okay. Then you go to this Cepheid variable and just find what is the period. In how many days the brightness and dimness changes. Okay, what is the period of change? If you know the period, from there you know the absolute magnitude. Okay, this is the absolute magnitude, means this. The log of luminosity is called absolute magnitude. So just by knowing the time, so this luminosity is proportional to period. This you can observe, right? After how many days it's changing. From here you know this. If you know this, and if flux you can always know. Remember, flux you can always know because that's what you are measuring. Then you know the distance. Okay? And Cepheid variables, that's why they are very important tools. And Cepheid variables were first used to know the distance of whole Milky Way galaxy. It's a very complicated issue. We will discuss another day, because how do you see through the Milky Way? The question is. We will see. So Cepheid variables are very good because they are very bright. When they are at peak, they are very bright, so you can see them far away. And just by knowing the period, you know the luminosity. If you know the luminosity and you are measuring the flux, then you know the distance. Is it clear? Okay. And it turned out that there are two kinds of Cepheid variables. I don't want to go into details. I think I will teach you these variable stars. So I will tell you that why there are two kinds. But their slope is a little bit different. The first type, okay, let me tell a few words. The first type of Cepheid variables are called classical Cepheid variables. Those which were discovered first. Their period of oscillation is generally from 1 day till 100 days. While type 2's period of oscillation is generally from 2 to 3 days till 50, maximum 50, 40, 50 days. Okay. These are really big stars. These are small stars. And these have more luminosity, these have less luminosity. And how do you know which one is type 1, which one is type 2? This type 1, they have a metal signature. You know atomic transitions, like if you have atom, if you put light on it, then it absorbs light and makes a transition, then comes back and throws away light, right? So those orbits were fixed. Fine. So by knowing the frequency of a transition line, you know that what is the atom. Okay. So from those transition lines, those are the spectrum. We will learn about spectrum in next talks. You will know that there are metals. If there are metals like iron, cobalt, nickel, then those are called type 1 and they are very bright. In type 2, they have less metal signatures. There are less amount of metal in the whole star. Okay. We will discuss about it in detail.
What about RR Lyrae?
Okay, very good question. RR Lyrae are very small stars. Sometimes they are white dwarfs. Some very small stars which oscillate, and their oscillation period is always within 1 day, within 24 hours. They bright and dim, but the thing is they don't bright too much. They don't become very bright. So their brightness is always very limited. We don't use them mostly. Our main thing is Cepheid variables, say classical Cepheid variables for now.
And this scale here is not the log scale, no?
This is they should be in the log scale, otherwise they won't be luminous. I should write here luminosity. Log luminosity of the object divided by luminosity of sun. Okay. But this period is in log scale. You can see 1, 3, 5, 10, 30. Okay.
As a star, as you have said, the type 1 are the bigger stars, type 2 are the smaller stars. So, the larger stars have more metal content, should they have less?
More
The larger
luminosity.
No, the content of higher metals.
No, it's not always true. It's only for these variable stars, not always. We will learn about stars properly. That's why I'm not worried. But then we can use Cepheid variable to know as far as we can go. The thing is, this is wrong. This is wrong because as you go further and further, their brightness is not that bright to locate them. So say you go very far away. This is our galaxy. There are 20-30 galaxies here. You go far away and see a small galaxy here. There, if there is a Cepheid variable, you can't detect it. The variation of intensity is within the intensity of the whole galaxy, so you can't see it that something is varying there. Okay. So this method fails, and then we have to go to some new measurement technique. But by this method, we can go up to 10 megaparsec or even more. Okay. Sometimes 20-30 megaparsec. So our Milky Way galaxy, which is 30 megaparsec almost, so we can almost cover all the stars of Milky Way galaxy. I'm sorry, you can go to 30 megaparsec, not kiloparsec. Milky Way galaxy is 30 kiloparsec. You can go to 10 megaparsec, so you can go to nearby galaxies. But you cannot measure distances to very far away galaxies. Okay? And the first discovery of a new galaxy was done by using this Cepheid variable. This story I would like to tell because this is a Nobel Prize winning story. Importance. Their importance is that because of Cepheid variables, Hubble did two most important discoveries. The first discovery what he did was, he was looking at a nebula called Andromeda Nebula. Today we know it, today we call it Andromeda Galaxy. That time they thought it's some haze of cloud, they called it nebula. Okay. When he saw Andromeda Nebula, he saw a variable star, Cepheid variable star. He detected that it's a Cepheid variable star, and he saw the period. From there, he was the first guy to get such a great photograph. Before that, looking at another galaxy was not so good. You can't see galaxy and all the stars, variable stars separately. But Hubble used the most powerful telescope in 1920s. Okay, and he found out there is a variable star here. And once you have a Cepheid variable star, you just have to know the period of oscillation. So he just noted the period of oscillation. From there he found out the distance. What he found, people knew that Milky Way is just 100,000 light years or 30 kiloparsec. What he found was this distance was almost more than 500 kiloparsec compared to 30 kiloparsec, which is the size of Milky Way. So if it is 30, he found it's more than 500 kiloparsec. So the galaxy, so this must be a new island of stars. So that's how we knew that Milky Way is not the only thing in the whole world. Before we used to think Milky Way is the only thing. Einstein even thought that. But he in 1924 he published his paper. And from there he measured, after that in 5 years he measured thousands of galaxies. And he found that our universe is made up of a lot of galaxies. Okay. And then the second important discovery, which is not today's topic, but he used Cepheid variable for that, when he found the distance of those galaxies and found the speed at which the galaxies are going away from us. How do you know the speed of galaxies? By knowing the redshift. I told you that if you look at the spectrum of a galaxy, the light which is coming from a galaxy, you see a lot of emission lines or absorption lines due to those metal transitions. Those lines should be at a particular frequency from Bohr's calculation. Say iron. So this is some orbit of iron, this is another orbit of iron. So electron jumps from here to here. When it comes back, it always gives a definite frequency of light. But if it is going away or coming towards us, then this frequency will be shifted. So from that shift, you will know that what is the speed at which the thing is going away or coming towards us. What Hubble observed in 1929. This was the greatest discovery, according to me. To know that Milky Way is not the whole thing, there are so many galaxies. The second greatest discovery is that when he measured the distances of galaxies, except for Andromeda and nearby galaxies, all other galaxies, all other thousands of galaxies were going away from each other. And that's how we came to cosmology and expanding universe. The story which I told you some other day. So see, I showed you an image of, this is really good. I showed you an image of Andromeda galaxy in a photographic plate in 1924. Now I show you Hubble Space Telescope taken a real photograph in a camera, CCD camera. And see, they have see the resolution. So there is a Cepheid variable star. So this is at some brightness, then it lowered, then again it brightened. Okay?
Yeah, this is the same one which Hubble used.
The same one.
Yeah, same.
The exactly same one now, today, it looks like this. Okay? So we have reached a long way. But Cepheid variable fails because if we go very far, in far away galaxies, we cannot see the variation of intensity. So we cannot know in how much time they are fluctuating. Okay? So we have new technique which is called a type 1a supernova. A supernova is a blast of a star. A type 1a supernova is a blast in which the whole star is thrown out. The whole star. Okay? So much of light comes that you can see the supernova. So if there is a galaxy, the galaxy has some light. If this supernova occurs, then you will see a light somewhere which is as bright as the whole galaxy. I showed you in the last talk, right? There was a galaxy and there was a supernova. And the intensity was same. So you can go see further using this type 1 supernova. And they have a light curve. With time, their intensity at a particular frequency keeps on decreasing. Okay. So they first increase and then they decrease. And it turns out that this peak is always the same. Okay? If this peak is always the same, then what you have to do? All you have to do is, what Sagar said, go to the nearby type 1 supernova, whose distance you know. You know their distances, and you know flux. If you know distance and you know flux, then you know luminosity. And this luminosity is always same for all supernova. So you know the luminosity of all type 1 supernova. So when you see a type 1 supernova very far away, you know the luminosity, all you have to measure is the flux, then you get the distance. Currently this is the most important tool because a decade ago it discovered something important, the accelerating universe, which I taught in last talk. And it turns out that this is not always same, it's not always the same height. Okay? So height is always different. But there is a way to make it standardized. You can make it standardized by a different way. You can see here. And how you can do it is, it turns out that the time it takes to decay is proportional to the height with the same proportionality constant. Okay? So all you have to know is if you catch the supernova before the peak and then see how much time it takes to die away, half of the peak. And then that time will tell you what is the peak. Once you know the peak is the luminosity. You know the luminosity, and from experiment you know flux, then you know distance. So this is our most reliable source, standard candles. These are all standard candles because we know their luminosity by some way. Either from basic physics, which we will discuss some other day, that what should be their luminosity, or by the method which we discussed now, that nearby supernova you catch them from parallax or from Cepheid variable method. You get their distance, from there you get their luminosity.
for the type 1 supernova, we had that the maximum luminosity was proportional to the length of decay, right?
Yes, yes.
That was it.
Yeah. The peak of the luminosity is proportional to the decay width. The time it takes to decay away. Okay? Half of decay. Let me be precise. I thought let me be precise. So what happens? Sometimes, here you are measuring luminosity, here you are measuring time. Okay? So sometimes some supernova you observe it was like this. Fine? Another time you observe, it was like this. So the peak is not always same. However, this distance and this height by this distance is equals to this big height by this big distance. Okay? So using the same proportionality constant you can do it. By the way, I tell you, we still don't know the exact physics of this. We don't know why this happens. So even if I keep on, in the next lectures when I teach you about supernova, I don't know. Nobody knows this answer. We know about Cepheid variables, what happens. If I get time, I will tell you today. But we don't know this. Okay? Mechanism we just skip for today. So by using this type 1 supernova, how far can we reach? We can reach up to 100 megaparsecs or maybe little more. 200, 500 megaparsecs. 1 parsec is 10 to the power 13 kilometers. 100 megaparsec is like 10 to the power 20 kilometers or 10 to the power 21 kilometers. That far. So that you will have millions and millions of galaxies whose distance you can know. And when it was used, type 1 supernova was used to find distance of millions of galaxies, it was found out that galaxies at a particular redshift were more fainter than they should be, than they were expected. So that means they are further away. So universe must be accelerating, which I told you last time. I don't want to repeat it again. But so this is a very important discovery. The first discovery Hubble made using Cepheid variables, that universe is expanding. The next standard candle is type 1 supernova. We used it and we discovered that universe is accelerating. And who knows, when we use the next step to go further, what we will discover. Maybe we will discover something extraordinary. Maybe the acceleration occurred for some small time, maybe something is going on. Okay? Now I'll tell you a little about standard rulers. Things whose distance you know. One standard ruler which we discussed is the size of Earth's orbit, the major axis of Earth's orbit, okay, which is 2 astronomical units, roughly. But if you want to measure distances very far away, there is something called a baryon acoustic oscillation. I might put myself in trouble by telling you what it is, but I will try. If you want to listen, then listen carefully. So in early universe, see, universe is expanding, right? So there was a time when everything was together. Galaxies were not formed. Universe was so hot that atoms were not neutral. Electrons were ripped off. Okay? So you had a plasma in the universe. In that plasma you had protons, neutrons and electrons. They are just jumping out of each other, and light. But universe was so dense that before light means photons, before photons could travel a little distance, they get absorbed again by a charge. Because light is electromagnetic field, so it interacts with charge, right? So there were charges, there were ions in the plasma. And before light could travel, all the time it got absorbed, emitted. So light couldn't travel much. So there was this pressure due to light. Okay. Now suppose, and then there were random fluctuations, which were, the origin of these fluctuations are quantum fluctuations, which we believe were caused by inflation. Forget about it. Just for now, think that there was a plasma, there was a fluid, ionized fluid. Overall the fluid is liquid, but individual parts are ionized. And then there was some contraction and expansion of density was occurring in that fluid. Okay. So think of a point where density was somehow being pushed, higher density. Then what happens? Sound waves start moving far and far and far. Okay. So sound wave is moving because contraction and compression and air fraction is going on.
Like a ripple.
Like a ripple, but water ripple is a mixture. So I don't want to give the analogy with water ripple. It's a real sound wave. Just like when I talk, air molecules vibrate to your eardrums. Okay. Now they were traveling, but what happens? At some time, universe expands so much that it cools. Once it cools, electrons get combined with protons to form hydrogen. So universe becomes neutral. Once it becomes neutral, now light could travel. So light escaped. So light was not now giving pressure. So I tell you, a very high density region is going like this. So very high density region is first like this, after some time it's here, after some time it's here. So it's going like this, and then light goes away. Now the only force remains is gravity. This is very dense region, and this is the light region. This is light, this is dense. So because this is a dense region and there is no pressure now, so gravity will make it collapse. This will happen with everywhere at the same distance. This distance is called the sound horizon. The distance that a sound wave travels before universe became neutral. Okay? And this sound horizon is actually 150 megaparsec. And because once light left, all the matter which was there, electron, proton, they all formed, collapsed and formed galaxies. So, if you go to universe somewhere and exactly go 150 megaparsec away, then there is a higher probability that you will find more galaxies. But in the universe, this is not the only thing which occurred. There was not a single point. Every point things were occurring, right? So one wave was going from here, one wave was going from here, one wave was going from here. So all this mixture. So to know this 150 megaparsec distance, all you have to do is statistical analysis. What you have to do? So if I have a galaxy here, if I go far away from the galaxies, I will see more and more galaxies. But as I go far and far, I should see less and less galaxies. Because the universe was clumpy. Everything got collapsed and formed galaxies. But so the probability of finding a galaxy, if I start from one galaxy and going far away, the probability of finding a galaxy is falling. But exactly at 150 megaparsec distance, the probability suddenly increases and again dies. So that means these are called baryon acoustic oscillations. So their length is always 150 megaparsec. So they are standard ruler. Okay? So you know their length is 150 megaparsec just by measuring the angle. 150 megaparsec is a big ruler. So you can measure the angle. You cannot use Earth's orbit to measure distance galaxies because the angle is very small. 1 astronomical unit is a small ruler. Here you have a big ruler, so you can know the angle. If you know the angle, by parallax you can know the distance. So this is the last thing about distance, which was very difficult by the way, I am sorry. Now universe so far, if you look from very far, zoom out, we see a lot of galaxies. This is Hubble Ultra Deep Field View. If you expose Hubble telescope for a long time, you see a lot of galaxies in a small angle. You know, in 1 degree of angle, you see so many galaxies. Everywhere galaxies. This is how your universe looks. Okay. And then if you come a little nearby, you see a galaxy cluster. So there is a region around which a lot of galaxies are being clustered. Okay. Then maybe this galaxy is our Milky Way. Maybe.
So what is this distance?
Not in this one, huh?
What is this order? What is the order of this distance?
This is like few megaparsecs. 20-30 megaparsecs. Distance between two galaxies is 1 megaparsec. Okay. So you have some galaxies, so this is like 20-30 megaparsecs. The previous diagram, this is like 1000 gigaparsec. Okay. So this is
should not be in gigaparsecs.
the whole universe is gigaparsec.
No, the whole universe is 14 gigaparsecs. Right?
So if you take, so say I am taking 1 degree.
Yeah.
So if I take 180 degree, then they will keep on adding on. Okay.
If I have 100, I have to take 160.
Yes, there is some multiple order of magnitude. Don't worry about it.
Should be in megaparsec.
Okay. No. And this is how a typical spiral galaxy looks. So we believe that our Milky Way galaxy looks like this. So if this is not Milky Way galaxy, some galaxy. So we will be here somewhere. Okay, from the center some 8 kiloparsec distance. We will be here. And then if we go there, we will see our solar system. This is 1 astronomical unit and this is almost like 20 astronomical unit. Okay. And then we go further, we see our planet. And if you think this is very big, tell me somebody who is from far away. Who is from far away? No, you're from Agartala, which is somewhere here. Okay, maybe this is how much? 1000 kilometers.
Yeah, almost 880.
Say 1000 kilometers. So if this is 1000 kilometers, compared to this distance, the size of universe is 10 to the power 23 kilometers or 22 kilometers. So you can just imagine how humongous it is, how many zeros times greater. Okay? It's a big universe. knowing this distance, this talk was very necessary in astronomy talk because distance measurement techniques had to be there. We must know the distances of objects. Now you know roughly what is the technique we use. Standard candles and standard rulers. Okay? What do you feel now? Some people feel that we are very small. Oh my God, what happened? We thought that God created us. Earth is a special place. We must be the center of everything. Now what happened? Oh my God, this must be wrong. I don't know. Some people feel like that. Or do you feel scary? The universe is so big, I might get lost. Or do you feel wonderful? You feel wow, the universe is so big. We are at a small corner of the universe, and we have life, intelligent life. So maybe there are so many stars in our galaxy. There might be so many planets in which there will be intelligent life, and there are so many galaxies. So many lives. Can we do a time travel? Can we meet them for the questions? Okay. This photo I wanted to show, but Suraj left. This is a photo which this guy Suraj took in 2012 July. I was not here, I was in Ayuka. But in 2012 June, there was Venus transit. June 6th, I think. I forgot. This is Venus in front of Sun. Using NICER's telescope, Suraj took this photograph by this camera, this bloody camera. And look, Venus in front of Sun. So this is we have not done much of practical astronomy here. I request all of you, let's do some practical astronomy also. Just not see all this, how many distance. Let's take some photographs. Let's study Orion Nebula. Sagar, can we take the photograph of Andromeda Galaxy on a very good day? We can take it, right?
I don't think so.
No, we can take on a very good day. Not here, not nicely.
I mean, in some place else, yeah.
We'll take NICER's bus and go to Jatni or somewhere.
There we can, for sure.
Right? We can take a photograph of Andromeda Galaxy and see how it looks from some DSLR camera. Okay. So, thank you for listening and for sleeping and for getting bored. If you have to ask anything, then ask. For the first time, I finished in time. Switch on the lights.
Using the baryon acoustic oscillations, as you said, what the fuck? उड़ा दिया था अगर.
It's okay, switch on those lights. Ask.
As you said, the distance, the probability of getting the number of galaxies increase will be at around 150 megaparsec.
So, not the peak, but it should decrease, but there will be small bump.
Okay, a small bump. It's rather difficult to say that the universe doesn't have, because